Keep around lesson number 60. Rabbi Shimon began speaking and said, it is a time to act for God. Why is it a time to act for God? Because they have invalidated your torah. What does it mean they have invalidated your torah? This refers to the supernal torah, which becomes invalid when this rectification is not carried out. This refers to the torah of the Atik ancient, eternal one. One verse says, fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you. Fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you. And another verse says, who is like you among the mighty ones, O God. Rabbi Shimon called to his son, Rabbi Elazar, and said, and sat him to one side. And said Rabbi Abu on the other side. And he said, we embody all these things. Then he said, we embody all these things. The rectifications have thereby been carried out. They remained silent. They then heard a sound, and their knees trembled against each other. What was that sound? It was the sound of the supernal assembly gathering together. Number one, there are pathways of torah that contain a very great understanding. An understanding that can only be reached by way of wealth. As regarding the simple level of the torah, if there is no flour, there is no torah, meaning that one must at least have a source of income. Similarly, regarding this very great understanding, one must possess very great wealth. One must possess a great fortune that lacks nothing. For this understanding requires possessing all wealth in the world, all the wealth in the world. Even the tribe of Issachar, which possessed such understanding, as in from the sons of Issachar, who possess understanding, only attained this by way of wealth, as in Issachar, Chamoy, Gara, is a bony donkey, which the Targum translates as wealthy in possessions. Therefore Moses and all the prophets possessed very great wealth, so that they should be able to attain this understanding. And since the torah encompasses this understanding, it is therefore called a fortune. Similarly, all those through whom the torah was transmitted possessed very great wealth. Moses, for instance, who brought the torah to Israel, was a very wealthy man, as our sages said. Similarly, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who a rebbe, Yehuda Anasi, who arranged and codified the Mishnah, and Rav Ashi, who codified the Talmud and arranged it all, were also extremely wealthy men, as our sages said, since they codified and arranged the entire oral Torah, and the Torah was transmitted through their hands. They were therefore also wealthy, for this understanding requires great wealth. This is alluded to in Soul, carve for yourself. Upon which our sages comment, this holiest discarded carvings shall be yours. This is so regarding the simple level of the Torah. Before one presents a novel interpretation, one must first present one's fundamental assumptions, and then one can cast aside those assumptions and present the intended concept. For the intended concept is the main thing, and all the ideas and fundamental assumptions that precede it are in the category of holiest, for they are carved away and discarded from around the intended concept. Similarly, regarding the deeper understandings of the Torah, one must first go in roundabout ways until one reaches the intended concept. For the main thing is the intended concept. All those roundabout ways are an aspect of holiest. representing wealth, through which one attains understanding. This is alluded to in soil. For yourself, the psolis shall be yours, which was the source of Moses' wealth. This psolis of the tablets represents the roundabout ways that are carved away and discarded from around this understanding, and they correspond to wealth, through which one attains this understanding. This is alluded to in the letters of meuman, money, the acronym of which is Misham Nisashe Moshe. Misham Nisashe Moshe, that was the source of Moses' wealth with the vav. Numerically 6, referring to the tablets themselves, which was the source of Moses' wealth, for the tablets were 6 long and 6 wide, as our sages said. Misham Nisashe Moshe. Number 2, one attains this wealth by rectifying the concept of the ancient one, the concept of longevity of the elder year. One needs longevity in order to contain within it the wealth of this understanding. Now, longevity means that one must endeavor to lengthen and increase one's days of life, each and every day, from the point at which it begins for each individual. Is certainly short at first. That is, at the beginning of each day, it is very difficult for a person to do the service one is supposed to do that day, such as praying, studying Torah, etc. Therefore, the beginning of the day is short, for one must begin gradually, and only afterwards can one increasingly expand one's service. So a person must endeavor to augment, expand, and stretch each and every hour that comes afterwards, augmenting and expanding it with additional holiness. And the same applies to the following day. One must continually expand it with yet additional holiness. Thus each and every day will be expanded with additional holiness, and this is the concept of longevity. Now Abraham, who attained the level of elder, an aspect of longevity, an aspect who attained the level of elder, an aspect of longevity, thereby attained wealth, as in Abraham was old, advanced in years, and God blessed Abraham with everything. This is alluded to from elders will I gain understanding. For by way of the aspect of elder, one attains understanding, which comes through wealth, which is drawn into longevity, which is an aspect of an elder. Number 3, now the aspect of elder, which is to constantly expand and stretch one's days with additional holiness, is attained through engenders additional holiness each day, by way of which one's days are stretched and expanded, as in awe of God increases days. This is alluded to in awe of God is his storehouse, as is he built woman, like a storehouse, narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. This is because the beginning of the days is narrow, and only then do they expand gradually with additional holiness by way of awe. Hence, by way of awe, one attains longevity, an aspect of an elder, the rectification of atik, by way of which one attains wealth. This is because awe protects the opposite from the opposite of wealth. This is because awe protects from the opposite of wealth, which is poverty, which is caused by the concept of charm is an illusion, and beauty is hevel, insubstantial as air. Charm is an illusion, and beauty is hevel, insubstantial as air. For illusory charm is conveyed in the various ways in which a person stands. It talks with people, etc. And each way has its own charm. All of these illusory charms are caused by the evil insubstantiality of beauty, as in charm is an illusion and beauty is insubstantial. That is, one who does not guard himself for the beauty of woman becomes beset with lust for these illusory charms. Although is the opposite of this, as written, the illusion of charm and the insubstantiality of beauty. But a God-fearing woman is to be praised. Therefore, when Abraham and Isaac arrived at places that lacked awe, as soon as they wanted to enter those places, they sensed this, for due to their great levels of holiness, they began to sense the beauty of women, so they sensed that there was no awe in these places. This is why they took upon themselves to separate from their wives, as if they were their sisters, as alluded to in, for I said, there is no awe of God in this place. Afterwards, Abraham rectified this and drew longevity, as in Abraham dwelled in the land of the Philistines for many days. Abraham dwelled in the land of the Philistines for many days, as in awe of God will increase days, but then the Philistines destroyed all of Abraham's spiritual accomplishments. As in all the wells that Abraham had dug, the Philistines filled up. Thus, when Isaac arrived there, he too was forced to separate from his wife, as if she was his sister, until he drew longevity into that place, which corresponds to awe, which protects one from the years. Then she became permitted to him again. As written, after he had been there for many days, Abimelech looked and saw Isaac playing with his wife, but by having drawn longevity, he attained wealth, as written, Isaac planted in that land and reaped in that year 100-fold. For one who lacks awe and does not guard himself from the hevel insubstantiality of beauty will fall into poverty, as in, do not lust her beauty in your heart. For going to a prostitute will bring one to lack a loaf of bread. This is because wealth and the hevel, insubstantiality of beauty are two opposites. Wealth coming from the lengthening of the breath, while beauty from the interruption of the breath. At the moment of ejaculation, breathing is interrupted for two reasons. One is so that the seminal fluid is not cooled by the breath, which is cool air that enters continuously from the outside, for it must be discharged, while warm, so that it will be virile, able to give birth, so that it will be virile, so that it will be virile. The second reason is since the force of expulsion is busy expelling and forcing out the seminal fluids, there must therefore be a cessation of breath. For breath is an expulsion of air and an intake of air, and since the force of expulsion is but busy pushing out the seminal fluids, it cannot expel the air, so breathing must cease. Now the air vapors that were inhaled beforehand and remain inside provide energy for the force of expulsion, by way of which the seminal fluids are ejaculated. Furthermore, according to the purity and clarity of this heavels, air/breath, so will the baby be fair and healthy. For if the air is pure and clear, then the ejaculate that is energized by the air is also clear and clean, and then the baby will also be fair and healthy. If, however, the air is cloudy, then the ejaculate will also be cloudy. This is alluded to in, a man resembles hevel, for the fetus is formed according to the breath. This is also alluded to in, mankind is only hevel, for the hevel is what causes the baby to be fair and healthy. This is the meaning of beauty is hevel, for beauty is according to the hevel in some. The insubstantiality of beauty is caused by a cessation of breath. Therefore, someone who lusts after the beauty of women, meaning that he is under the influence of the cessation of the breath, is thus the very opposite of wealth, which corresponds to the lengthening of breath. This is because all types of wealth, all types of grain, all types of trees and vegetation, and all types of metals only come about through rain, as so do all forms of treasures as well as in. God will open up for you his good treasures to give you rain in your land. Now rains correspond to breath, since they draw and receive air from the outside. Now rains correspond to breath, since they draw and receive air from the outside. As written, God's breath makes ice, and the expanses of water become solid. God's breath makes ice, and the expanses of water become solid. This is alluded to in the fortune of the wealthy one is Kiryas Uzoi, his fortress of mines. That is, wealth comes through the process of breath, which is the kar, cold air, that is received every moment from the outside. Hence, kiryas uzoy, as in rains of mitrois, izoy, rains of mitrois, uzoy, his mighty torrents. Nanach, nachman, meuman. Nanach, nachmo. Nachma meuman, this is the meaning of the verse. And they're among the hevel, insubstantial deities of the nations, those who can bring rain, are there among the hevel. Insubstantial deities of the nations, those who can bring rain. The hevel of the nations corresponds to cessation of the breath, as in beauty is hevel, the insubstantiality of air as above, which lacks the aspect of rain, since rain only comes through breath, is said. This is alluded to in the verse, wealth attained through hevel will dwindle, because hevel causes wealth to dwindle. On the other hand, a cool-headed person is a man of understanding, for by way of cold air, the cold air of the breath, one can attain understanding, which is attained by way of wealth, alluded to in the breath of the Almighty, will give them understanding. For understanding comes mainly by way of the breath, corresponding to cold air, and this is because the intellect is brought to its ideal state mainly by way of the breath. In order for the intellect to be in this ideal state, so that one is able to reach contemplative understanding. In order for the intellect to be in this ideal state, so that one is able to reach contemplative understanding, the body requires fats. The intellect is like a burning lamp, for it burns by drawing the fats to it, like the oil that is drawn to a burning wick. So when there are no fats in the body, the intellect is unable to be kindled with understanding. Thus the dehydration of the body fluids causes insanity, for the mind is damaged by a lack of fats for fuel. Now it is the breath that maintains all the fluids and fats in the body, for if not for the lobes of the lungs blowing on the heart, the heart would incinerate the entire body. Hence the maintenance of the fat and fluid in the body is mainly by way of the breath, by the lung taking in cold air from the outside to cool the heart, by way of which the mind is able to be kindled with understanding. This is alluded to in God's lamp is the human neshama soul. The existence and maintenance of God's candle, which is the intellect, is by way of the neshima breath. In conclusion, through awe one attains longevity, by way of which one attains wealth, by way of which one attains understanding. Through awe, in conclusion, through awe one attains longevity, by way of which one attains wealth, by way of which one attains understanding. Number 4. Whoa, 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 whoa. Number 4, number 4, whoa. Number 4, whoa, 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 whoa. Now, wow, 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 wow. Awe is in its perfect state when it is expressed Three directions, awe of heaven, awe of one's mentor, and awe of one's father and mother. Thus when the sage of the generation merits worthy students and worthy children, awe is thereby perfected. The awe of the sage and teacher of the generation is the category of awe of heaven. The Yahweh of the sage and teacher of the generation is the category of awe of heaven. The students' awe of the teacher is the category of awe of one's teacher. And the children have awe of the father and the mother, and by way of these three awes, awe is perfected. Furthermore, the awe of each of these three must be threefold. That is, the sage's awe, which is the category of the awe of heaven, must be composed of all three minds: chachma, wisdom, bina, understanding, and das, knowledge. This is because the sage's awe comes mainly by reflecting upon the greatness of God, which he studies and probes with his mind. Hence his awe is attained through his mind, which is why awe must be full with all three minds, that his chachma, bina, and das should all be filled with awe of God. Now the student's awe, which is the awe for one's teacher, which comes by way of the knowledge that one receives from the teacher, must be drawn into all parts of the study. This is also an aspect of three directions, as in the threefold torah. And the sum of one's awe, which is the awe for one's father and mother, must be drawn into the category of an inheritance from the forebearers, as in a house and a fortune are an inheritance from one's forebearers. A house and a fortune are an inheritance from one's forebearers, and the awe must permeate, and the awe must permeate all aspects of wealth, which is an inheritance from the forebearers, corresponding to the three directions, as in one should always apportion one's wealth into three: a third in business, three lines, a third in business, a third in real estate, and a third in cash on hand. These three types of wealth correspond to the three types. The three times wealth is mentioned in the Torah. Throughout the entire Torah, wealth is only mentioned three times regarding stoim. Regarding stoim as written, so that you not claim, I made Abraham wealthy. Regarding Rachel and Leah, as in for all the wealth which God has taken. And regarding the shkolim, given for the census, as in the wealthy shall not give more. The third in business corresponds to the wealth mentioned regarding stoim, because regarding stoim the verse says, forgotten by travelers, for they wanted to put an end to business transactions, which represents travelers, as in rejoice o zavulin, when you embark on business journeys, which is why one must specifically invest in business. This is a third in business, a third in real estate. Corresponds to the wealth mentioned regarding Rachel and Leah. For the truth is, wealth is mainly for the purpose of understanding, and otherwise wealth is only for women and others with limited consciousness. This is why they said, for all the wealth that God has taken from our father is for us and for our children, meaning that all the wealth is only for women and those like us with limited consciousness. But as for Jacob, but now everything that God has told you do, meaning that Jacob needed wealth in order to contemplate God's greatness. This is a third in real estate, as in a woman is compared to the earth, and a third in cash, property, to ground, real estate. A woman is compared to the earth, and a third in cash on hand corresponds to the wealth mentioned regarding shkolim, about which is said to atone for your souls, corresponding to in whose hand are the souls of all life, and the spirit of all human flesh, in whose hand are the souls of all life, and the spirit of all human flesh. Number 5. Now the revelation of all comes about when barren women give birth. This is because all is revealed by way of birth, as in tremor seized them their pangs like a birthing woman. Tremor sees them there, pangs like a birthing woman. Birth is accompanied by a discharge of blood and a harshness. Birth is accompanied by a discharge of blood and harshness, which correspond to aha. This is especially so when a barren woman gives birth, in which case the blood and harshness had been very blocked until now. Therefore, when they then come out, Ah is revealed to a greater extent. Furthermore, the amount of Ah revealed reflects the births. When one barren woman gives birth, Ah is revealed, but when many barren women give birth, that much more Ah is revealed. This is alluded to in pangs, like a birthing woman. The amount of Ah revealed reflects the births. Therefore, Isaac's birth was on Rosh Hashanah, for he represents the epitome of a very great awe, as in the fear of Isaac, since when Sarah gave birth, many other barren women, a woman gave birth together with her. As our sages said, this is alluded to in, for I have given birth to a son in my old age. The birth of Isaac, which represents the revelation of awe, draws longevity, representing an elder, as in awe of God increases days. Number 6 now. Barren women give birth when people are roused from their slumber, for there are people who sleep away their entire lives, and though they appear to others to be serving God, devoted to Torah study and prayer, nevertheless, God has no pleasure from any of their service. All their service remains down here and is unable to rise and go up. This is because the main source of life is the mind, as in wisdom enlivens its possessor. Thus, when service is done mindfully, it is imbued with a life force with which it can rise up. But when one falls into the category of limited mindfulness, an aspect of sleep, it is unable to rise up. And there are people who have fallen into an aspect of sleep on account of lusts and improper behavior. Some of them were even good and nice people, but they fell on account of eating. For when a person eats food that has not yet been refined for human consumption, one's mind falls into an aspect of sleep. Just as on the physical level there are foods that increase the need to sleep, and others that decrease the need to sleep, so on the spiritual level there are foods that have not been refined, that bring on an aspect of sleep. On the other hand, when one eats with holiness and purity, then one is in the category of the bread of countenance, for the mind is the countenance. As in a person's wisdom lights up his countenance, but when one does not eat with holiness, one loses one's countenance, that is, one's mind, and falls into an aspect of sleep. For the essence of food is in order to give life to the heart, as in he ate and he drank, and his heart was satiated. And as our sages said, bread feeds the heart. So when the food is not refined, or one does not eat it in holiness, one brings evil to the heart, and on account of an evil heart, the countenance is damaged, as in, why is your countenance severe? Why is your countenance severe? This can only be on account of evil in your heart. The same is true of the opposite, of seeking the countenance, meaning to search to regain one's countenance. It is dependent upon the rectification of the heart, as in, for you, my heart says, seek my countenance, hence, sometimes on account of unrefined food, which causes damage to the heart, one loses one's countenance and falls into the category of sleep, and must then be awakened from his sleep. But it is impossible to awaken a person from his sleep unless he has begun to rouse on his own, because there must be an arousal from below. However, when a person has aroused on his own, if he is then not awakened, he will continue to sleep for longer. Therefore, as soon as a person has roused, he must be shown his countenance, and his countenance must be clothed in the countenance that had departed from him during sleep. This is the concept of being awakened from sleep. And when we want to show a person his countenance and awaken him from his sleep, we must clothe the countenance for him in stories This is because there are 70 faces to the Torah, which correspond to 70 years, for each one is different from the others. And there are 3 reasons why specifically the countenance must be clothed. The first reason is because it is similar to when healing a blind person. He must be secluded so that he does not see the light suddenly. The light must be constricted so that he is not harmed. Were he to see the light suddenly, similarly one who has been asleep and in darkness for a long time, when we want to show him his countenance and awaken him, we must clothe it for him in stories, so that he is not harmed by the sudden light. This is alluded to in I will see your countenance with righteousness. Righteousness is represented by clothing, as in I donned righteousness. Then I shall be satiated with your image upon awakening, for then one will be able to see while awake, that is after one has been aroused and awoken from sleep, for now he will not be harmed by the sudden light. The second reason why it must be clothed is so that the forces of external form do not take hold of a person. And the third reason is that the forces of external form that are attached to a person will not let him go. So his countenance must be clothed in order to make him look different, so that those forces will not recognize him. As in, you change his countenance and send him away. And there are several aspects to clothing the countenance. Sometimes one's countenance is clothed in telling a story, but at other times one cannot be roused by one's own countenance, and then one must be shown a higher countenance. And there are times when Torah ideas must also be clothed, such as when a sublime Torah is being said, which cannot be conveyed as is, but must be clothed in a lower and lesser Torah than it. Must be clothed in a lower and lesser Torah than it. This is alluded to in, O God, enliven your deeds in our times. Rashi explaining enliven to mean arouse. Your deeds refers to stories, as in, and in our times refers to the stories of the 70 countenances, which correspond to the 70 years, meaning that one must be roused by way of stories that are in our times, that is, stories of 70 countenances. That is, stories of 70 countenances. But when sometimes a person has fallen from all the 70 countenances to the extent that it is impossible to awaken him with any of the countenances, other than by way of stories of ancient times, from which all the 70 countenances and 70 years receive their life force. This is an aspect of Atik, the ancient one, of the elder of a distinguished countenance, from which all the 70 countenances receive their life force and their distinction. This is the concept of abundant kindness. One who teaches his student one law has acted toward him kindly. As our sages said, whoever does not allow his student to serve him is as if he withheld kindness from him. Serving a sage is an aspect of the laws of life that the student receives from his master. Thus what the master teaches his student is an aspect of kindness. Have events when he rouses him with one of the 70 countenances by clothing it in, O God, enliven your deed in our times. This is an aspect of ordinary kindness, but when he rouses him with stories of ancient times, this is an aspect of abundant kindness, for all the countenances and kindnesses receive from them. For of all the countenances and kindnesses received from there. Number 7 now, when one is involved in rousing people, one must guard oneself from unworthy students, so that one is not infected by their evil and harmed by it. As our sages said, whoever teaches an unworthy student. Similarly, our sages forbade writing holy scrolls on the leather of non-kosher animals, as written, so that God's Torah be in your mouth, from that which is permissible to enter your mouth. And teaching another is like writing, For the tongue represents my tongue is the pen of an adept scribe, since it becomes inscribed and written on the student's heart. As written, write them on the tablet of your heart. Thus one's words should not be written on the leather of a non-kosher animal. That is an unworthy student. However, it is impossible for a human being to be on guard from unworthy students hearing his words. For this, one studying must be to learn, to teach, to fulfill, and to create. That is, studying with one student should be as if one had created him, and as if one had created the Torah. As our sages said, whoever teaches another's son Torah is as if he had created him, and as if he had created the Torah. When one studies with this intention, God will guard him so that his words are not written in the memory of the unworthy student, but will be forgotten. Similarly, when one is involved in arousing others with stories, one's conversations and stories should also be in this category of teaching, that is, to learn and to create. This is the concept of the conversations of Torah scholars require studying. That is, whatever is needed for study is also needed for the conversations, which are an aspect of stories. This is his leaf will be litrufa for a healing. His leaf represents the conversation of a Torah scholar, as our sages said. His leaf will not wither, even the conversation of a Torah scholar. Thus, litrufa lahatir fe, to make the mouth permissible, which is from that which is permissible to enter your mouth. For his conversations are in the category of the conversations of Torah scholars require study. That is, to learn, to teach. That is, to learn. That is, to learn, to teach. That is, to learn, to teach, to fulfill and to create. That is, to learn, to teach, to fulfill and to create, to learn, to teach, to fulfill and to create, to learn, to teach, to fulfill and to create. Only then one is guarded from unworthy students, as in from that which is permissible to enter your mouth. From here we learn that we do not write on the leather of non-kosher animals. Number 8, this is the meaning of what our sages taught on the verse. His leaf will be litrufa for a healing. Lahatefe ilmim. Lahatefe akarois. To open the mouth of the mute and to open the mouth of the barren. For rousing people from their sleep. By way of stories, which is an aspect of his leaf will be litrufa. Brings about the aspect of lahatefe ilmim. To open the mouth of the mute, for until then, while they were still in the category of sleep and did not hear the arousal of the sage, and his words were not heard by their ears. For fortunate is the one who speaks to hearing ears. Fortunate is the one who speaks to hearing ears. But these people were like the deaf, who do not hear at all. For this reason neither could they speak. For the deaf person can generally neither hear nor speak. That is, since he cannot hear, neither can he speak. But now that the sage has aroused him, and he hears his words, now he can speak. This is lahatefe ilmi. To open the mouth of the mute is in open your mouth for the mute. Through this, the altefe akaro is to open the mouth of the barren for the speech which had been so constricted within them for such a long time, during which they were like the deaf and the mute. Now that this speech emerges, it does so with great force, as in the mighty ones who make his word. This force enters into the procreative organs, as in my strength and the first of my virility, which refers to the bezH, to the bezH, trusted ones of the generation. bezH, trusted ones of the generation, will correspond to the procreative organs. They receive this force as in those who hope for God will have their strength renewed. Therefore the kidneys are called bezH, for the kidneys are part of the procreative system. Thus when the trusting ones of the generation receive this power of speech, they receive it lawfully and justly. Each one according to his bitachon receives this power. This is open your mouth for the mute, as in those who hope for God will have their strength renewed. For by opening your mouth, the power of speech enters into the procreative organs, which are the batchanim, which are the batchanim, which receive it lawfully, which are the batchanim, which receive it lawfully and justly. Which are the batchanim, which receive it batchanim, which receive it lawfully and javavasfully. Meuman, which are the bezH, which receive it lawfully and justly, but the organs of speech must be brought near and close to the procreative organs, so that they can receive the power of speech, so that they are not in the category of you are close to their mouths, but distant from their kidneys. Therefore the organs of speech and those of procreation have the same struggle of bakshur. Both are full of sinews and nerve cells, for they are part of one system, for procreation comes about through speech. This is alluded to in his leaf will be la letrufa, healing leatefeilmim leatefeakara, is to open the mouth of the mute, to open the mouth of the barren, for one is dependent upon the other, hesed. This corresponds to oral union, kissing, and genital union. Oral union precedes genital union, as brought in the Kabbalistic texts. For through the power of speech, which represents opening the mouth of the mute, which corresponds to oral union, genital union is brought about, which represents opening the mouth of the barren. This is the meaning of the breaking of an earthen vessel. When a couple becomes engaged, to tell us that now that there has been an engagement for the purpose of procreation, which corresponds to trusts, to kidneys, which are organs of procreation, alluded to in her husband's heart, busted her, alluded to in her husband's heart, busted her, through which the trust of the other side was annulled and broken. That is why we break an earthen vessel, as in you trusted in fraud and corruption, shattered it like a potter's jug, and no shard can be found among its fragments. For holy trust that comes about through an engagement is the opposite of the trust of the other side, which is represented by the breaking of an earthen vessel. Also alluded is that if the couple do not conduct themselves with holiness, but betray the concept of trust, of procreation, they themselves will be in the category of a broken earthen vessel, which comes about by trust in the unreliable. This is alluded to in do not trust an olive prince. From she who sleeps in your bosom, guard the doors of your mouth. That is, it is impossible for trust. The organs of procreativity to be close to speech, which represented by Aleph, the acronym of the Hatefeilmim, and from she who sleeps in your bosom, means so that this bringing about procreation. means so that this bring about procreation from she who sleeps in your bosom, is as in she will sleep in your bosom. This is only because by way of guard the doors. Or this is only because by way of guard the doors of your mouth. This is only possible. This is only possible by way of guard the doors of your mouth. This is only possible by way of guard the doors of your mouth. This is alluded to in let him place his mouth in the dust. Perhaps there is hope. Dust represents the absence of speech. As in lower than dust will be your words. In other words, speech must be used to open the mouth of the mute. As above, through which the power of speech comes to those who hope for God. As above, who represent the organs of procreativity. This is perhaps there is hope, so that speech reaches those who hope for God as above, and this is, your offspring will be like the dust of the earth. Procreativity is dependent upon the aspect of, let him place his mouth in the dust, as said. This is also many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken. That is, they will be awoken and roused from their sleep. Those who sleep in the dust of the earth represent the absence of speech. Some for eternal life represents speech, as in man became a living creature. As the Targum translates, a speaking spirit, which corresponds to the opening the mouth of the mute, and he is for disgrace, represents disgrace. Broke my heart, which corresponds to forgetfulness. A broken heart, which corresponds to the broken tablets, is in the tablets of your heart. And the breaking of the tablets causes forgetfulness. As the sages said, had the first tablets not been broken, there would not have been any forgetfulness. In other words, those who are not worthy of receiving, for they are in the category of non-kosher animals, will forget. Nach nachman meuman. Nanach nachman meuman. Nach nachman meuman. Nachman meuman. Nanach nachman meuman. Nanach nachman meuman. Nanach. Number 9. This is represented by the shofar. The shofar represents. This is represented by the shofar. The shofar represents arousal from sleep, as brought in the Kabbalistic text. That shofar alludes to wake up, you who sleep from your slumber. This brings about the opening of the mouth of the mute. This brings about the opening of the mouth of the mute, and the opening of the mouth of the barren. This brings about the opening of the mouth of the mute and the opening of the mouth of the barren. This is alluded to in Tekiah Shvarim Trua. Tekiah corresponds to the absence of speech, as a yin. Tekato, if you shake your hand with a stranger, you have been ensnared. If you shake your hands with a stranger, you have been ensnared with the words of your mouth. Trua corresponds to speech, as in the lips of a righteous person. Yiru will guide many, and Shvarim corresponds to trust. As in Sivroi, his trust is on. His trust is on God, his Lord. His trust is on God, his Lord. Corresponding to the organs of procreativity, as in, will ashbir bring on labor and not bring about birth. Will ashbir bring on labor and not bring about birth. This is because the shofar, representing arousal from sleep, brings about the opening of the mouth of the mute and the opening of the mouth of the barren. That is with the power of speech that comes out with force from those who were aroused from the sleep. That is with the power of speech that comes out with force from those who were aroused from the sleep, who had until then been in the category of the absence of speech, for they were like the deaf and the mutes. But now that they have been roused to God from their sleep to the point of hearing, the arousal of the true sage, now they begin to speak, and the speech enters into the organs of procreativity, who are the God-trusting ones of the generation, and this causes the barren to give birth, as represented by Rosh Hashanah, when Sarah gave birth, and all this is represented by the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah, the Tkiyah Shvarim Trua. Furthermore, the barren giving birth brings about the revelation of Avava, which is also an aspect of the shofar, as in, can a shofar be blown in town, and the people not tremble? Can a shofar be blown in town, and the people not tremble? This itself is an aspect of the shofar, which is narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. Narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, corresponding to a woo. From the narrows I called out to you, O God, answer me from the wide expanse. O God, for ours revealed by way of the shofar, since through it one attains longevity, which is the widening and expanding of one's life by constantly adding more holiness. This corresponds to narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, corresponding to the Yah of God as his storehouse, as in he formed woman like a storehouse. This is an aspect of the rectifications of the Atik, which corresponds to longevity. The elder is also narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, as brought in the Kabbalistic texts. The rectifications of the beard correspond to who from the narrows I called, answer me from the wide expanse. For initially it is narrow, and then it gets wider. Whoever had wider. For initially it is narrow, and then it gets wider and wider. For the elder represents longevity, for his days are always lengthened and widened by a constant increase in holiness, which is attained through Avava, which is attained through which is attained through Avava. All this is represented by the shofar, hence through the shofar, which represents the arousal from sleep. The barren gave birth, and through this all is revealed, and all subdues the insubstantiality of beauty, which corresponds to the years that come out of the shofar, which correspond to the insubstantiality of beauty. For shofar comes from the root of beauty, as in shafru, make beautiful your deeds. In other words, the heirs of the shofar subdue the insubstantiality of beauty. For the shofar corresponds to the revelation of all. For the shofar corresponds to the revelation of all. This is the meaning of Rabbi Yochanan said, all the days of that tzaddik, choni amagal, does anyone sleep for 70 years? That is, sleep 70 years uninterruptedly. He asked, one day while he was walking along, he saw a man planting a carob tree. A carob tree does not bear fruit for 70 years. Are you sure you will live 70 years to eat from it? He asked him. I found a world with carob trees in it, he answered. Just as my forebears planted for me, I too plant for my descendants. While Chavoini was sitting down, While Choni was sitting down and eating, he became drowsy and fell asleep. A rock formation grew around him and concealed him from view. And he slept for 70 years. When he awoke, he saw this man eating from that carob tree. Who planted this carob tree? He asked him. My grandfather, the man answered. I have surely slept for 70 years. Choni said, He then saw that his donkey had given birth to offspring of its offspring, had given birth to offspring of its offspring. He then saw that his donkey had given birth to offspring of its offspring. Now Choni HaMalga was a very great man. Choni HaMalga was a very great man. As the Talmud states there, that when he entered into the study hall, he would answer all questions that the rabbis had, for there was no aspect of the Torah that was hidden from him. Therefore he asked, does anyone sleep for 70 years? That is, how is it possible to fall into an aspect of sleep from all 70 aspects of the Torah? For it is possible to fall from one or several. How can one fall from them all? He saw this man planting a carob tree. Are you sure you will live for 70 years to eat from it? He asked him. A carob tree represents the elder. Corresponding to Atik for a carob tree is a cypress, which corresponds to Mordechai. As the sages said, in place of the thorn bush will grow a cypress. This is Mordechai, na Mordechai Babai. Now Mordechai represents Rav Chesed, abundant kindness, for they are numerical equivalents. For the Vavavei are numerical equivalents, which corresponds to Vavavatik. In other words, he saw someone involved in stories of ancient times, which corresponds to Atik. He asked him, are you sure you will live for 70 years? Live represents arousal from sleep, corresponding to speech, that is, have you tried to use stories from our times to arouse people? To eat from it alludes to, from that which is permissible in your mouth. That is, that your words will be heard by worthy students. This means that he asked him, why are you telling such sublime stories of ancient times? Unworthy students who are not in the category of the permissible in your mouth may hear from you. Have you already tried and tested to rouse people by using stories from our times, from within the 70 years that correspond to the 70 aspects of the Torah, and successfully rouse them thereby from their sleep, since your words reached worthy students who are in the category of the permissible in your mouth, corresponding to eat from it? Why are you now trying to delve into the telling of such sublime stories? Since your words reach worthy students who are in the category of the permissible in your mouth, corresponding to eat from it. Why are you now trying to delve into the telling of such sublime stories, the stories of ancient times, and are not concerned that unworthy students might hear these stories, and are not concerned that unworthy students might hear these stories? He answered him, Alma becharuva ashkachtu, I found a world with cherubs. That is, even if I will tell stories of ancient times which correspond to charuva, cherubs, I can bring about the state of shechicha, forgetfulness, that the unworthy students will forget them. That is, as explained above, God protects the tzaddik who endeavors to rouse the world from sleep by telling stories. So that his words will be forgotten from the hearts of unworthy students. By telling stories, that is God. God protects the tzaddik who endeavors to rouse the world from sleep by telling stories, so that his words will be forgotten from the hearts of unworthy students. Nanach, nachman, meuman. Nanach, nachman, meuman. Nanach, nachman, meuman. Just as my forebearers planted for me, I too plant for my descendants. That is just as I was born, by way of such stories, as in opening the mouth of the mute and opening the mouth of the barren, so too I plan for my descendants. I plan for my descendants, that is, our children are also born by way of these stories. This means that he told him that he must tell such stories in order that barren women can give birth, just as his forebearers were involved with telling such stories, which facilitates birth, representing barren women giving birth by way of wage. Himself was born, so too must he give birth in this way. For birth is mainly brought about by these stories. This is the literal translation. In the same way that my forebears planted me, I too planted my descendants. While he was eating, he became drowsy and fell asleep. That is, he ate, and specifically because of eating, he was overtaken by slumber and fell asleep. On account of his eating, he fell into what was for his spiritual level the category of sleep. For as explained above, one can fall into the category of sleep by eating. A rock formation formed around him refers to the mind trips and fantasies that swirl around and around during one's sleep, concealed him from view. For people do not realize that someone is in the category of sleep, believing that he is devoted to Torah study and serving God, while in truth it is all in the category of sleep. When he awoke refers to an arousal from below. He saw a man eating from above that carob tree. Means that he saw him involved in telling stories and eating from it, corresponding to from the permissible in your mouth. Who planted this carob tree? That is, how old is this story? For one may tell a story which in truth took place only 4 years ago. My grandfather, the man answered. This refers to the elder, meaning that he told him that the stories he is telling are stories of ancient times, representing the elder Atik. I have certainly slept for 70 years. That is, he has surely fallen into the category of sleep. From all the 70 aspects of the Torah, which correspond to the 70 years, he saw his donkey refers to wealth, as in Yisachar is a bony donkey. For great wealth comes in this way, by telling stories, which rouses from sleep. One opens the mouth of the mute and opens the mouth of the barren, for this causes ought to be manifested, and all causes longevity, an aspect of the elder, a rectification of the Atik to be drawn on. In this way, wealth is drawn into the longevity. This is Rebbe Shimon began by saying, it is time to do for God. It is a time to do for God. This refers to the supernal Torah, which becomes invalid when this rectification is not carried out. In other words, the supernal Torah, which represents contemplation, which is invalidated and cannot endure if it is not sustained by way of these rectifications, which correspond to the rectifications of the Atik, represented by longevity. It is written, fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you. And another verse says, who is like you among the mighty ones, O God. This refers to the arousal from below, which is in praise of the Jewish people who rouse themselves from below. As in, fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you, only the yin. Can there be an arousal from above, as in, who is like you, O God? Rebbe Shimon called to his son Rebbe Elazar and said, Rebbe Abu, he said, and sat Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Abu, he said, we embody all these things. This refers to the perfection of all, which comes through the aspect of the three directions, which are awe of heaven, awe of one's teacher, which are awe of heaven, awe of one's teacher, and awe of one's father and mother. Hence, through Rebbe Shimon, Rebbe Elazar, his son, and Rebbe Abu, his student, awe was perfected, which brings about longevity, corresponding to the rectification of the Yavatik. They remained silent, they then heard a sound. This means that those who were in the category of silence, an aspect of being mute, and were unable to speak on account of the sleep they were in, heard a sound, meaning that they were aroused from sleep. As in, fortunate is the one who speaks to hearing ears. Their knees knocked against each other. Meaning that they were aroused from sleep. As in, fortunate is the one who speaks to hearing ears. Their knees knocked against each other. This represents giving birth, genital union, for by being roused from sleep, as in opening the mouth of the mute, one opens the mouth of the barren, which represents the oral union that precedes the genital union. What was that sound? It was the sound of the supernal assembly gathering together. This corresponds to telling stories in which one clothes the aspects of the Torah. For clothing is represented by a kanaf wing, As a yin, your teacher will no longer yikanef be yidin, and by this clothing one awakens from sleep and begins to speak, as in the winged creatures will tell the world. Lesson will tell the word. The winged creatures will tell the word. Lesson number 61. Rabbi Shimon rejoiced and said, "Oh God, I heard your voice and I feared." Adding, in that situation it was appropriate to fear. Number one, by virtue of faith in the sages, we are able to bring out judgments into the light. Judgment is the middle pillar, which is the middle path that does not veer to the right or to the left. This is attained by virtue of faith in the sages, and do not veer from whatever they tell you, to the right or to the left. And through this judgment emerges clearly as in true judgments. Nach, nachman.